welcome. Thank you so much for having me. This has been a really interesting day so far, and I think all of the forest presentations are actually very complimentary. I'm really happy to go after Conservation and International and Fair Carbon and our last speaker, who've all given some really useful and important context, I think, on the forest carbon markets. And really what I'll try to give today is a little bit of perspective, building on that, talking about the challenges in scaling these projects and getting more projects off the ground, and that we're seeing as we are undertaking projects, and a little bit of more of that operator perspective. So why forest? We focus primarily on reforestation, and that's because reforestation has such huge potential to scale, and it can account for up to, a recent paper in Nature shows that it could account for 30% of the global drawdown potential. And really, there's no way of meeting our climate targets without including nature-based solutions and reforestation. It's also something we can do right away. We don't have to wait for additional R&D, and it's very cost effective. And so we believe we need all the solutions, we need everything, but we have chosen to focus on reforestation for these reasons. This is just a slide to say that our company and our team have lots of experience. So this is what I'm speaking from. We focus a lot on biodiversity and projects around the globe, and who many different partners who work with us. So I'm going to talk about two challenges to scaling reforestation projects, and particularly very sort of high community impact, community-led, and biodiverse restoration challenges. So we hear a lot in the market, though our last speaker pointed out there are a lot of new projects being registered. There's still a big supply and demand gap. So one thing we hear a lot is so many funders, private sector funders, saying, we cannot find projects, we cannot find projects. And we have many, many forestry partners around the world who say we cannot find funds. And there's some people who really see this as a matching problem, like we can't get the funders matched with the funds. And I would actually argue, I don't really think we have a matching problem. I think we have a readiness problem, or readiness challenge or opportunity. And part of that is that there's a lot of potential projects and teams who want to scale up their work, but they need a lot of capacity building in order to be investment ready for the private sector funding in particular. Because the private sector is a little bit less willing than government or nonprofit to invest in technical, regulatory, social, financial capacity building to get the organizations ready to receive a multi-million-dollar 40-year investment. The other gap is the funding to build that capacity, to do the capacity building we're talking about, to do the eligibility assessments. You can spend $1 million just assessing eligibility of projects before you even identify the right projects for very large types of carbon investments that some of the funders want, who have large amounts of money to deploy. There's infrastructure that's needed in nurseries and seed banks, and sometimes roads, fire prevention, and there's really not a great source of funding for that today. It's a real funding gap. And finally, other forms of investment readiness, like creating registration documents, PDDs, legal structures to house the funds. Land tenure is a very important one that came up earlier. There's lots of gaps that don't fit cleanly into today's market's carbon funding model, which the voluntary carbon market is is money for planting usually, but not a lot of money for these other things, which gets a project to planting ready. Okay, let's see. So that brings me to the second challenge I wanted to highlight, is there's a tension in reforestation projects or any nature-based solution. I think this could be true, of the desire to be very customized and also very consistent. And you could think of this as like a local global type gap. On the one hand, we need and must have very, very consistent standards and high quality standards, so that we know when you buy a credit that it is a real credit, it is has the durability, it has the additionality that we are claiming it has. That's being worked on a lot at the sort of market level with standards alignment, audits, enforcement, and some technology solutions. So that is, I think, a key part of that gap, because each of these projects is very different, but we must have a layer of consistent trust. Then there's the practice side of it. We have restoration best practices that must be adapted locally. And I'm sure a lot of people in this audience have thought about integrating traditional and scientific knowledge. And then to get a little more specific, one of the sort of biggest parts of this gap to me that we think a lot about is that carbon is consistently valued, but the co-benefits are not. So to put this into numbers, what we find, and this is not a scientific study, but it's in all of our talks with our potential funders and across our projects, it costs about 5 times as much to do a project with the quality and biodiversity and community benefits that we believe makes a good high quality project, and that would get a CCB label or community and biodiversity label. So it's about 5 times the cost, but they'll usually only give you a price premium of maybe 20% for that project. So you can see that the economics for doing a high quality project are not there. Because the market is not valuing those other benefits to the project. So the way that so that's a little bit of a context on what we see in the market. The way that Terraformation is attacking this challenge or opportunity is we are providing a seed to carbon forest accelerator. And so we have brought together experts from many, many disciplines, science, technology, and carbon, and we put together basically a full stack toolkit. We've had over 700 applicants from potential forest creators around the world who want to scale up their work. These are sometimes governments, they're sometimes for-profit, but many of them are nonprofits who've been doing restoration with grants, maybe for some years, but they want to get to the point where they're investment ready so they can get scale up funding through the voluntary markets. And we provide them with technology. We started as a climate tech company, but now we are more than that, as we realize the problem requires more than technology, but also infrastructure, finance, and most importantly, probably a lot of training on sort of every aspect of project creation. We are very selective. We've taken less than 3% of all of these applicants who want to work with us, and we take them through a structured training program that has 3 parts and can last 18 to 24 months. So it's a long and rigorous process, but it's our way of trying to help address some of those challenges I talked about earlier, which include capacity building, and which include very efficiently sort of making sure that we're customizing and also addressing international market needs together with local needs. So we work closely with our local partners to try to come to the right balance. I thought I'd give you an example of a project just to bring this to life. So we've now completed 3 cohorts of our accelerator. This project in Ghana, it was in our first cohort, and it is an organization called Seawater Solutions in Ghana. And they had been working for several years, or many years, in the Ghanaian community. They're doing hundreds of hectares of mangrove restoration funded primarily by grants. They went through our accelerator, and have a term sheet right now to help scale up their work, which will take them from the hundreds. So it'll help them basically 10x their size to the thousands of hectares, and they may end up with as much as 7,000 hectares expansion potential. And the training they received was working through everything from how do you take a 2-year budget and make it a 40-year budget, so business side, to really thinking about how do you change your nursery operations when you go from a small nursery to a large nursery. The land agreements they needed with their partners to do an investable project versus a grant project were very different. So they had MOUs with the communities. In this case, they needed a completely different type of agreement, after carrying out an FPIC or a free prior and informed consent and social and biodiversity impact assessment workshop. So it's a very different kind of thing. So they received a variety of training, and now they're going to be able to scale up their work. So this is a success case of what we hope will happen with tens or hundreds of teams as we scale our work through our accelerator program. But if anyone has an interest in scaling their forest restoration work, or wants to learn more about what we do, I'm very happy to talk to.